speaking of things that affect us that did not affect, our ancestors in the savannah, it has a fancy name. It's called hyperbolic discounting. Basically, it means that I think that the present is much more important than the future. So I'm going to have that donut now, and I'm not going to worry that maybe, I'm going to gain weight if I keep having a donut every single day, or that I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor is going to be like, oh, Agnes, your cholesterol is not good. You need medication. And then I'll have that anxiety come back. Because the donut right now, it just looks so good. It smells so good. It's loaded with amazing sugar. And what's better than a donut? I don't know, maybe you're a salty person, maybe a piece of sushi or something. But I just think that what's now is much more important.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, and this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. In this podcast, we continue to explore the hot topic of what the workplace will look like in the coming months and years. Many business leaders I've talked to are making decisions based on their past experiences, their individual leadership styles, and their beliefs about what the world should look like. In other words, they're following their gut. But in doing so, it seems to me that they risk making decisions based on outdated paradigms, personal biases, and maybe the fear of change. My guest today is Agnes Vishnevkin, the Chief Operating Officer of Disaster Avoidance Experts, a consulting firm that uses cutting-edge behavioral economics research to help corporate clients address potential threats, seize unexpected opportunities, and resolve persistent people problems. Thanks for joining me today, Agnes.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
There's so much I want to talk to you about. I love this combination of using behavioral economics to think about how we design work, how we lead our businesses. So let's start with just the dummies version of behavioral economics. What are we talking about when you're talking about behavioral economics?
We're talking about how psychology and our behavior impacts our decision in the business world. So economics is the business world. But however, there's a lot of psychology in there. And one of kind of the inspirations for my work and for my business is the work of a Nobel laureate, Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize back in 1978 for his work in economics. And there was a lot of psychology there that kind of talked about all the surprising and unexpected ways that the way we think, our brains, make decisions that are really irrational. And it goes back to, where we come from. And humans did not evolve for the modern world. We did not evolve to live in a world with podcasts and smartphones and cars. We did not evolve for that. Humans evolved in the savannah back in Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. And back there, we didn't have all this stuff. Life was very simple. You run away from the tiger or you get eaten by the tiger. And life was very dangerous because if you see a shadow, you think it might be a tiger, you don't run away. It's like a life and death thing. So we evolved to really, that's why there's so much anxiety in our world today, anxiety disorders. I have one, like a third of the people have one because there's notifications on our phone, terrible news, coming at us from TV, from radio. And our brain is wired to really just go on alert anytime there's a shadow of a threat. Because if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have survived. Our ancestors survived, and that's why we're here today. But however, we're just so ill adapted for today's world. And so behavioral economics is about using our brain that evolved for the savannah for today's world in the 21st century.
So when we talk about fight or flight responses, those are hardwired into us, but are those our only responses to potentially threatening circumstances? Are there more objective ways of determining how we respond to a threat?
There are better ways that we can learn and practice But automatically, what we are wired to do, what we've evolved to do is just fight or flight. And there's also freeze. So fight, flight, or freeze. Kind of like deer in the headlights, I don't know what to do. That happens to me a lot. Which is, I've heard some people describe that as kind of like flight within yourself, like internal flight. I call it freeze. So, but we can learn to be different, but we have to work at it. It's not automatic. And it doesn't make sense to just work on it for every decision. If my decision, what kind of donut I want to have, whatever, don't waste the resources. It's very resource intensive to do this work. And the way to decide whether it's worth it is to think about, is this the situation that, my ancestors may have faced back in the savannah? Would they have needed to make a strategic plan to return to the office after a global pandemic? No, there was no workplace, you know. So we're not evolved to make long-term plans. We're not evolved to think for the long term. So that's how when you need to put in that work to really focus and to overcome, to go against our gut.
So when we're making, I guess we all make decisions with imperfect knowledge, right? We can't
Absolutely.
know everything. And I'd argue that bias towards action is always preferable to just sitting on the sidelines, waiting to see what's going to happen, especially as a business leader, especially when there are people looking to you as a leader to do something, to make something happen, to, protect them, to move an organization forward, to keep things healthy in our business ecosystem. So, but I've seen where leaders' biases, whether they recognize them or not, mislead them in evaluating whatever data is available. What are some things leaders can do to better understand the current environment and predict what it might look like into the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that it's important to consider all aspects of a decision, including aspects that, of a decision, of a situation, of a context that I might not like. For example, the pandemic is happening and I'm just like very, very afraid to go anywhere. I don't want to get COVID. But really, how dangerous is it to meet my friend outside, to sit on her porch? It's not dangerous. So I need to override my feelings and I need to really look at the data. The data will say, it's fine. The risk is incredibly low outside. On the other hand, there are folks who are right now making back to work plans, and we're doing a lot of talks and consulting right now with companies talking about back to the office plans, because people think, okay, like pandemic is over, we have vaccines, excellent. I would like to believe that. I want the pandemic to be over. I got my vaccine, and I'd like to think that everyone rushed the Walgreens and everything, CVS and whatever they got, and got all the vaccine and everything they can get. But in reality, when we look at the data, so many people are not vaccinated yet for whatever reason. And even depending on different states and cities, vaccination rates vary. Then also there are many different variants coming out. There's Delta variant, and we're just beginning with the Greek alphabet. I mean, there's a lot more down there. We don't know to what extent some variants are going to be more transmissive, even though we have vaccines. We might need to develop new vaccines. Things might happen. Kids are back in school. Mask policies vary. So if I just say, I'm done with the pandemic, everyone come back to the office, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I'm over it, A month from now, am I going to have to change that and do like a yo-yo effect for everyone? It's important to look at things that I don't, want to see, because it's uncomfortable. Who wants to do uncomfortable things? Who wants to do that? It's uncomfortable for a reason. So it's very, very important to look at all sides of the story. Maybe ask someone who you trust for an outside opinion. So those are just a few things that we can do to make sure that our decisions are prepared for the long term.
So try to collect as much information from other angles outside of our own experience to look at something, and then think about what the consequences, how in different variables that change into the future, how this decision I'm making now may need to be changed or be affected by what happens in 3, 6, 9, months or years even down the road.
Exactly. And you want to be prepared. You want to have a flexible plan. And again, you want to look at all the information that might be uncomfortable and upsetting, So that's just very important. I want to go with my gut and only, read, half the news that's there, because the other half of the news I disagree with, but even if I disagree with it, if it comes from a worthwhile source and it's, good evidence and good research, it's very important to look at it. As a leader, we really have to, bite the bullet and do what's uncomfortable, to take our stakeholders and our employees in the right direction for the long term.
What kind of tools are there? I mean, I don't think many of us, even a lot of really good leaders that I've worked with over the years, I think when we get into those areas that are really outside of our comfort zones, and some of us have very broad comfort zones. I would argue that I've got a very broad comfort zone. I feel pretty competent to deal with most things that come my way. But there are things outside of that, things that make me uncomfortable at some point. What are some tools that a leader can utilize in order to be more comfortable, to recognize this is an area that either I don't have a competency, or this is an area of thought that would lead to something that I don't want to happen. So I just want to avoid even going down that path. What are some tools I could use to be more comfortable, or to be objective in at least facing and considering that information?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you say you want to avoid going down the wrong path, so that's the name of my consulting company. It's Disaster Avoidance Experts. So that's what we kind of want to do. And we look through all of the research that, as it comes out, the recent behavioral economics research, and put together a variety of decision-making tools. And so I'm going to share with you the shortest tool that we have. It's something I keep on my desk. It's a little card. It's the size of a business card. It's folded into a tent card. It's actually on the other side is my business card. And, folks, can get these. I know it's like a couple of dollars on our website at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. But the best thing about it is that it shares the 5 tips from avoiding disastrous decisions. And so here are these 5 tips that are very easy. And this is just kind of for a quick decision. And this is kind of to give you a flavor of the kind of tools that we've put together that leaders like yourself and others can use. And so what are the 5 questions that you ask yourself? The first one is, what important information have I not yet fully considered? So in the example of, bringing back people from, remote work, what have I not yet considered? So this is maybe some uncomfortable information. Maybe I haven't done a survey of my employees to see what they want. Maybe I want to go back to the office, and maybe I miss being around people. But, it's amazing. Only about half the employers that we work with have even surveyed their staff. They never know. Maybe people hate to be back in the office, or most of them do. And actually, surveys say that only about 10 to 15% of people overall want to come back 9 to 5 to the office. So what important information did I not yet fully consider is number 1. Number 2 is, what dangerous cognitive biases might I be, falling for? So for example, the planning fallacy, everything goes as planned, but, it doesn't. If I have to be somewhere in 10 minutes, I shouldn't leave the house 10 minutes before I need to be there, because let's be honest, the chances of even me forgetting my keys and having to go back up to traffic or, something like that. So what are the judgment errors that I haven't considered? Number 3 is, what would a trusted and objective advisor say? And we just touched on that. So, if Mike is, my old colleague and a great friend and always has good advice, I should just call him up or text him or whatever, send him an email. What do you think? And if there's not enough time, or it's middle of the night, just close your eyes and imagine, what would Mike say? Oh my gosh, he would tell me it's a terrible idea. Okay. We can get a lot of the benefit without even calling out.
I don't recommend anybody using me as the guide for what would Mike say, because it would probably be inappropriate and not necessarily helpful. So don't use me. Find somebody you really trust. But okay, go ahead. Sorry.
That's funny. Okay. So number 4 is, how have I addressed all the ways that this could fail? That's something we often don't do, because we do post-mortem. We're like, well, this failed, or let's have a meeting and, a plan and a report of all the ways this went wrong. No, don't do that. I mean, do that, but what's better is to do a pre-mortem before you do it. Say, what are all the ways that it could go wrong? Everybody write 3 things down privately and then submit them. And if I said that, because my supervisor doesn't know what she's doing, it was anonymous. And then we can go with all these things that maybe some of them are not very, kosher or like to say in public company, but that is a very, very reliable way to avoid a disaster. Just take a little bit of time to plan in advance and to really visualize what can go wrong. And then a lot of times you can prevent it in advance. How great would that be?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I've been through a lot of planning processes where the facilitator in a strategy planning session or something has us look forward a year forward and say, if you reach all of your goals for the year, what will you have accomplished in order to get there? But I like that idea of saying, what if you horribly miss your goal at this end of this year? What would have taken you away from that? And if what are the worst case scenarios in this situation? And what was the path to each of those? What would that have looked like? I think that's a great tool. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly, if all my, wildest dreams come true, what do I need to do? If all my wildest nightmares come true, why? Then you write those things down and then you pick the top things and you just make sure they don't happen. And yeah, it's exactly like the mirror image of like what you just described. Exactly. And so the last thing is what new information would cause me to change my mind. Yeah, the last one is just what would cause you to revisit this decision. And we can go back to some of these, but this is really good for people who have like analysis paralysis or teams. It's like, oh, I don't know, this is too scary. I just can't decide. Well, then you'll never decide. Or it's just like so much uncertainty. So then you just agree with your team or just on your own, you decide at what point would I change my mind? And we do this often with hiring in the HR world. Someone might get like 90 days probation. So maybe certain benefits don't set in, or maybe you need a different cause for letting someone go within the first like 30, 90 days or something like that. So we already do that. And here the idea is to do that for other decisions. Oh, I want to sign up for this, for this gym, or something like that. But I'm not sure, it's too far. Well, if I'm sick of the drive, I will just, forfeit the rest of my fee. And I've decided that in advance. Then, okay, just make the decision and wait 3 months, for example.
It's interesting. So you're looking, you're making a shorter term investment, but that helps you build a commitment to stick with whatever change for a period of time, so you can actually accurately gauge where that's working.
Yeah, and that avoids like the uncertainty of like, oh, I'm always not sure. Am I doing the right decision? Like, oh, just like anxiety. Who wants anxiety? Nobody wants anxiety. We have it, so we just want less. So exactly. So just decide in advance and then leave it alone.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 12 and enter the keyword Agnes. That's AGNES. On Thursday, September 30th, I'll be hosting a free webinar entitled Beyond Values, Building an Ethical Business Environment. This free webinar is approved for 1 professional development credit for SHRM certified professionals and 1 hour of business recertification credit for HRCI certified professionals. You can register for this free webinar at imperativeinfo.com. And if you're listening to this program after September 30th, you can still watch the recording of this webinar, as well as our previous webinars, on our website for credit for free. And now back to my conversation with Agnes Vishnevkin. I really love that you're an expert in behavioral economics, and you admit that you have the very anxieties that behavioral economics is designed to help alleviate. And so you're that's good. I mean, Sometimes it's a physician heal thyself, right? I mean, we all know that, at least you're open to the idea that, you get it, but there's certain things that are just probably outside of your control, and you just have to try to modify your behavior as you go along. I think that's a lot of leaders could benefit from that.
Yeah, and I think we're all human. Our brains are wired in a similar way, and it really helps me a lot with my decision making, coaching clients with with the folks I work with, and in my personal life. It really just helps me learn a lot faster. When I know that, I'm just not built for this world, and that's why we just have everyday's anxieties. And if you have stronger anxiety, you go to a therapist, and they would tell you some of the same things as well. So I just find it really helps me. I feel very fortunate to be in this area just because of how much benefits I gain, selfishly for myself.
There are there's so many things that are outside of our control, and so many leaders get mired in worrying about all those details that are outside of their control. And people do. Professionals, I've got friends who are so obsessed with what this person is going to do, or what this person's going to do, or what might happen in this area of the stock market, or all of those things, where 99% of the stimulus that drive our world are really outside of our control. And I'm constantly telling leaders that, and friends, anybody who'll listen to me, that that small 1 or 2% of all the stuff that's in your life that you actually have control over, that's a giant lever to moving your world. But you've got to focus all your effort on what you can actually do, you can actually control, and not worry about all the things that are outside of your control. Am I right when I'm talking to people like that, or am I missing something there?
I love it. I love it. I think you're exactly right, because there's so much outside of our control. It's just like we just can't deal with it. And it's one thing if I say, oh, just stop worrying about it. Like, that's probably not going to work. A person's going to worry about it because, like, it's very hard not to. But we can work to focus and to reduce that worry. It's only natural to worry about other things. For example, I might worry, I live in Ohio, so I feel very blessed that I do not have, like hurricanes, earthquakes. We don't have too many natural disasters over here. But, for example, we do have, I was like thinking, I'm like, well, what if there's a natural disaster, some kind of disaster? What would happen? And then I realized I live half a mile from a railroad track where there's like coal, chemicals, all sorts of stuff. So if there's an accident, I'm like 4 blocks away. And what would happen if there's a chemical accident? And then, of course, I started worrying. And then I'm like, okay, I need to do something about it. So I looked up the best, emergency preparedness, how to put together a bug out bag, how to be prepared to leave the house. Or I guess in our case, if there's like a chemical accident, I'll probably have to stay in the house. So I bought some plastic sheeting, and I got duct tape that I can tape, around the doors to the basement. I have lots of canned food, water. So if something happens, now I feel like, yes, it's outside of my control if there's some freak chemical accident. And it might not even happen during the time I live in this house or in this neighborhood. But, I'm prepared, so I can have less worry, and I know exactly what I would do, So, and that just kind of goes to so many other areas of our life. We can take steps to prepare. And then one thing, it's kind of like, well, like, what is Agnes doing? Why is she spending time and money preparing for this thing that's like probably never going to happen? Come on. But then we can also just, use this approach. You can think like, if there's an accident, if something happens and this like, a railroad goes off the tracks with some kind of toxic cargo, and what might happen? I might have to like stay in my basement for like weeks, or would there be no running water? Or like, I don't know, some kind of disaster would happen, or folks who live in earthquake prone zones. So what would be the loss? And you can put a number on it. The financial loss if I'm not prepared. And so say you calculate for some kind of disaster, maybe it's $20,000 would be the loss. And what's the probability of some kind of disaster that's, disaster du jour, maybe that you're vulnerable with? Say it's 1%. 1%. So then you take 1% of 20,000, and I'm not very good at math. How much is that? 200? $2,000. No. I should have picked an easy example. But anyway, someone can do the math, and you basically see that is the appropriate number to spend on a disaster. If it's $100 disaster with a 1% chance of happening, it's okay to spend $1. Don't spend more. But if it's a larger disaster, then it's reasonable to spend that amount to prepare for that eventuality. And now I've given up myself as someone who's bad at math, but you can have a calculator and you can figure it out and permit yourself to spend, whether it's hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, to prepare and do what's under your control.
And that gives you the freedom once you feel like you've done what you can to prepare for those circumstances that are causing you some anxiety, to remove that energy from that anxiety and direct it to something else that's more valuable to you, maybe helps move you forward in your life in a more healthy way than just worrying about things that are outside of your control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is a vehicle to remove your anxiety too. And I've experienced that in different areas of my life to prepare for things, once I did the thing. And then if I get like worried or anxious, I'm like, okay, well, if this happens, I'll do this thing.
So you've consulted with organizations of all sizes, leaders in all kinds of industries. What are the biggest blind spots you see when you're working with leaders? What are the blind spots about their own organizations, or maybe about their own leadership, or whatever it is? Do you see any trends that are common to even successful leaders, as far as blind spots that they don't recognize until somebody points it out to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could go on here for hours, of course. I have many favorites. And, we're just vulnerable to such a variety of like thinking errors with the way we're wired for the fight, flight, or freeze. And speaking of things that affect us that did not affect, our ancestors in the savannah, it has a fancy name. It's called hyperbolic discounting. Basically, it means that I think that the present is much more important than the future. So I'm going to have that donut now, and I'm not going to worry that maybe, I'm going to gain weight if I keep having a donut every single day. Or that I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor is going to be like, oh, Agnes, your cholesterol is not good. You need medication. And then I'll have that anxiety come back. Because the donut right now, it just looks so good. It smells so good. It's loaded with amazing sugar. And I mean, what's better than a donut? I mean, I don't know, maybe you're a salty person, maybe a piece of sushi or something. But I just think that what's now is much more important. And we want to be comfortable instead of thinking what's going to be in the long term. So, for example, going back to the office, to stick with my example, let's come back to the office and it's easy. But then if I didn't think through what the long-term impact will be, if I did not make those sacrifices to think for the long term, then it's kind of like I'm devaluing it. It's like, oh, long term doesn't matter. Right now I want to come back to the office. But in the long term, if people have to go back home and I'm not prepared, I need to go another work from home plan. Maybe instead I should just keep people working from home if they can, of course, or some kind of a hybrid office. So it's easier for people to go back home or something like that. And of course, a classic example of this is investments. Why do people not save enough for retirement? I'd rather spend the money now than save it for later because my retirement is just so far away. I'll never, get old. I'll work forever. It's just not true. The future is very important, but it just feels very distant. So we discount the importance of the future. And that kind of can really come back to, hurt us in many ways, unfortunately.
Yeah, David Maister in his book Strategy and the Fat Smoker talks about why so many companies' strategies fail, because he says we set these goals for the future that look great, but all the rewards are in the future, all the benefits are in the future, and all the pain and hard decision and hard work is right now. And that makes it hard for us as an organization to commit to really make the changes we have to make in order to get where we want to go. And so we end up putting a lot of our great ideas and admirable goals on the shelf because we don't want to do that work right now. And I think that's what you're saying too.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
We have a tendency to avoid the pain.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
I have one last question for you. It may be a sort of a French goodbye, but when you put on your prediction hat for me for just a minute, what do you think are the 2 or 3 biggest changes that are coming to workplaces that most leaders don't see yet?
Changes that most leaders don't see. Let's
Do
see.
you have anything
So,
predictive like, or are you too smart to make predictions?
I'm not sure, but I might need a moment. But let's see. I think one of the things that is coming, that some leaders, not many leaders, but definitely some leaders are already being caught kind of unaware, is the reluctance of people to go back to the office, 9 to 5 or even at all. So, and we've seen this happen, in the past months, giants, corporate giants like Amazon, and Apple, and even Google had to say, everyone come back to the office. And then a few weeks later, they said, okay, never mind, you can work from home, half the time or whatever. I mean, if it's possible, of course, for you to work from home, for the folks who were remote. Because people did move away out of state, and people did kind of, I don't have to commute. This is stupid. I don't have to do it. And you can't make me. I mean, if you make me, I'll just go find another job. So I think some people are really underestimating that. And I would say that at the same time, the the workforce is being so remote, just how many workers can be hired from all over the world. If someone's doing a job remotely, for example, folks from countries where there's, who have a high education but work in a country with a different kind of cost of living. I wonder if more companies will go to to those countries and go to the online marketplaces like Upwork to hire their staff or to hire their teams. And so for the employees who are working from home, who are working remotely, how do you stay relevant and make sure that, your job is not outsourced in a way, So that is one thing that I would say. And those are the two things that I have. I don't have three things.
No, I think that's great. No, I think that's great, and that's advice that I've given to a lot of HR professionals, but also folks in accounting and other white collar professions who thought their jobs would be safe forever. Is that with technology and a worldwide marketplace for labor, there's a lot of what you think is your daily work is transactional, and that can be outsourced to a computer or to someone else, someplace else in the world, a lot cheaper. And a business, for at least a purely transactional work, would be, in many cases, dumb not to consider outsourcing it to a place where they can get the same quality for less. And so what we need as professionals to be doing all the time is thinking about unique ways we can add value and to whoever it is that we're working for. And maybe we have 15 bosses because we become a consultant or a gig worker. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as it's fulfilling your, where you want to be personally and professionally in your life. And I can't wait to have you back on the show because there's so much to unpeel here still, but that's all the time we have today. So thank you for joining me today, Agnes.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation and would love to get back to it. And for anyone who's interested in learning more and getting some of these resources, we have a free online course that you can sign up for. It's at Disaster Avoidance Experts /subscribe. Disaster Avoidance Experts /subscribe. It's completely free. You get, it's not like, here's free and, then you have to pay $500 course. No, it's 8 free emails. You have videos, you have content, and then ongoing information so you can learn firsthand about these strategies and tips. So I hope to see you over there. Thanks for having me.
There you go. We'll include that in the show notes as well because that's great. Yeah. And thank you for listening. You can find previous episodes, show notes, and contact info for our guests at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and Imperatives marketing coordinator, Katie Bautista, keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, do good, be well, and share with others. We'll talk soon. Have a great weekend.